In the sweltering summer of 1969, as the world tuned in for the moon landing in Woodstock, two Central American nations tuned into something else, a brutal, tragic showdown sparked not by politics or oil, but by a football match. El Salvador and Honduras. Two neighbors close in geography, but worlds apart in land, wealth, and opportunity. What started as a World Cup qualifier would end in bombs, bullets, and 100 hours of war. El Salvador, small in land but overflowing with people. By the 1960s, it was bursting at the seams. Its citizens needed land, work, and space to breathe. So they moved across the border into Honduras, where fertile land and looser population pressure offered hope. Over 300,000 Salvadorans would come to call Honduras home. But in Honduras, resentment grew. Local farmers blamed the newcomers for rising land prices and job competition. In 1962, Honduras passed its agrarian reform law, meant to redistribute unused land. But in reality, much of that land came from Salvadoran squatters. Thousands were evicted. Homes were destroyed. Seeds of rage were sown. Now under football, beautiful, emotional, and deeply nationalistic. The 1970 FIFA World Cup qualifiers paired El Salvador and Honduras in a three-match series. The prize? A ticket to global football glory. The first game was on Honduran soil, June 8, 1969. Honduras won, 1-0. And then chaos. Riots erupted in San Salvador. A Salvadoran teenager, Amelia Bolanos, took her own life in grief. Her image was broadcast across the country, draped in a Salvadoran flag. She was mourned as a national hero. Newspapers fanned the flames. Politicians capitalized on the anger. June 15th. Match 2. This time, El Salvador's turn. Emotions ran high. The stadium was a cauldron of rage. El Salvador won 3-0. But the real battle was outside. The Honduran team needed military escorts to escape. Honduran fans? Many weren't so lucky. Cars were burned. Homes attacked. By June 27th, diplomatic ties were severed. El Salvador recalled its ambassador. The border was closed. Troops mobilized. The third match on neutral ground in Mexico was practically irrelevant. El Salvador won, but diplomacy had lost. On July 14, 1969, less than 3 weeks after the final whistle, El Salvador launched a full-scale invasion of Honduras. Planes dropped bombs on Tonkinton Airport. Tanks rolled in. It wasn't just a war, it was revenge wrapped in nationalism, flying under the banner of a football jersey. Over 15,000 troops from El Salvador swept across the border. Honduras, caught off guard, scrambled to defend. The war had officially begun. This wasn't a war of strategy. It was a war of chaos. Soldiers on both sides were poorly trained. Communication was a disaster. But the violence? That was very real. Entire villages were shelled. Roads became mass graves. Over 3,000 people died, most of them civilians. Homes were looted. Families were torn apart. And even amid the carnage, stories of humanity emerged. Honduran villagers offering shelter to fleeing Salvadorans. Soldiers trading food across trenches. War may bring out the worst, but sometimes it reveals the best. On July 18th, just 100 hours after the invasion began, the Organization of American States brokered a ceasefire. Both sides agreed to withdraw. But the damage? Irreversible. Over 300,000 Salvadorans were expelled from Honduras. Many returned to a country already choked by poverty. Homes were gone, communities shattered, and the border? Still tense. It wouldn't fully reopen until years later. So, was this really about football? No. The matches were the spark. The fuel? Years of inequality, migration disputes, and political opportunism. The war didn't fix anything. In fact, it hardened resentments that still echo today. Ask the people who lived through it. Football was never the real reason. It was just the excuse. Today, both El Salvador and Honduras remain football-obsessed. Stadiums still roar. National pride still burns bright. But the shadow of 1969 looms. The football war, one of the shortest wars in modern history, but also one of the most absurd. A reminder that passion, unchecked, can ignite more than cheers. It can ignite war. So the next time your team misses a penalty, maybe just scream into a pillow. Or buy a punching bag. Or scream into a pillow while punching the bag. But please, don't invade your neighbor. And hey, subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you don't miss our next episode, The War of the Stray Dog. Yes, it's real. And yes, it involves a border, a dog, and one very embarrassed army. Because history? It's not always written by the victors. Sometimes, it's written by referees and very confused diplomats.